the story of a woman who falls in love with a young Russian man and allows him to do whatever he wants to do with her. Helena is an ordinary middle-aged woman. She raises her son alone and teaches literature at the university. A young and successful man, Alexander, often comes to visit her. Helena and Alexander use the bed several times. He never stays for long, but Helena is content with the short time they spend together. One day, Helena goes to the cinema with her friend and tells her about her boyfriend. Helena's friend tries to explain to her that she should find a normal man. She is sure that Alexander will break up with Helena and leave her alone, but Helena is ready to risk it for him. She is sure that sooner or later, Alexander will leave his wife for her. A few days later, Alexander calls Helena and says he will arrive in 20 minutes. Helena dresses up for his arrival. Soon, Alexander arrives, and they immediately get down to business. An hour later, Alexander leaves without saying anything. A few days later, Alexander arrives, and Helena gives him a note and asks him to read it when he leaves. Later, she begins to learn Russian. Alexander comes to Helena again and she asks him about his job. Alexander works at the embassy and guards rich people every day. He says that usually, the French are afraid of Russian people, but Helena is not like that. That's why he likes her and wants to be with her. Helena says that she also likes him very much and asks when he will come again. Alexander says that he will soon leave for Moscow with his wife for 3 weeks. This makes Helena upset. Several days pass and Helena begins to miss Alexander. Nothing in life brings her pleasure. Helena invites her son to go to Florence together, but the boy does not want to miss school and football practice. Helena asks him to do this for her sake. She tries to relieve her boredom and stop thinking about Alexander. At last Alexander returns to France. He texts Helena and asks her to come home to see him. Helena immediately runs home after work, where Alexander is waiting for her, but this time he behaves differently. He asks why she is wearing such a short skirt and orders her to never wear it again. Helena doesn't like him telling her what to do, but Alexander grabs her by the neck, and she gives up. She is ready to endure this for his sake, and soon he leaves after having fun with her. During their next meeting, Helena asks Alexander where he lives in Russia. He says that he lives in Moscow on Taya Street. Helena is interested in knowing as much as possible about his life because she's in love with him. She confesses her love to him, but Alexander does not reciprocate her feelings. Helena asks him to stay with her all day, but he leaves and asks her not to call him anymore. He says that he will call when he wants to see her. Helena locks the front door to prevent Alexander from leaving, but he forces her to give up the key. Helena tells her friend about this, and she tries to explain to Helena that Alexander does not love her. Helena is not ready to accept the truth. One day, Helena takes her son to school. She says that she won't be able to come to the football match, but she promises that she will come next time. The boy does not believe his mother's words and gets out of the car in anger. Meanwhile, Helena receives a message on her smartphone and hopes that Alexander wrote to her. Later, Alexander comes to her house, but she doesn't let him in. Alexander immediately turns around and leaves. Helena opens the door and runs after him. An hour later, Alexander leaves and Helena takes shower. Several weeks pass and Alexander never calls Helena. She decides to call the embassy herself to talk to him. Alexander invites her to the hotel and she comes to the hotel room. She waits for Alexander all day, but he does not come. Helena calls the embassy again and finds out that Alexander has flown to Moscow. Helena becomes depressed and walks around the city all night. Her son waited for her at home all night. The next day, boy cooks for himself and goes to school himself, after which he asks his father to come. Helena's ex-husband condemns her for not raising her son well and only thinking about her boyfriend. He takes his son with him. Helena tries to find Alexander everywhere as she can't live without him. Later, she decides to go behind him to Moscow. Helena buys tickets and flies to Moscow to find him, but in vain. When Helena returns to France, she goes to a psychologist and tells him about her life. 3 months pass and Helena begins to forget Alexander. She brings her son home and goes to every football game. Her life gets better, but one day Alexander calls her and says that he will come. Helena asks her son to spend the night with the neighbors. The boy does not want to leave home, but Helena forces him to leave. Alexander arrives, and they immediately go to the bedroom. Helena invites him to spend the night together, but Alexander refuses. Helena takes him to town and says goodbye to him. He confesses his love to her, but this time Helena makes up her mind to get rid of this relationship. Helena understands that they will never see each other again, but she is glad that Alexander was in her life, although not for long. And this is where the film ends.